I used to believe every language could be learned, every cipher broken. After all, I was a philologist, a scholar of words, roots, structure, and history. Language was my life. It was how I understood the world. But that was before I found the Codex Tenebris. It came to me not through excavation or scholarly request, but via a plain package left at my office door. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in black ink on aged paper, with a looping flourish that reminded me of 16th-century ecclesiastical calligraphy. Inside was a book. Rough leather, blackened as though it had been burned, yet curiously unmarked by ash or soot. The pages were brittle, yellowed, but intact. And the writing, well, that's where the trouble began. The symbols didn't match any known language. Not dead tongues, not modern dialects, not even cryptographic substitutions. I scanned the characters into every translation engine and linguistic database I had access to. Nothing. Not even a pattern. Just shapes. Beautiful, disturbing, shifting shapes. Some glimmered like wet ink, others bled slightly into the page if I stared too long. For weeks, I obsessed. I charted similarities, noted repeated forms, even dreamed of the characters. In those dreams, they moved, squirming like eels, or arranging themselves into weeping faces. And then, one evening, after too much wine and not enough sleep, I read a line aloud. Just one. The sounds were harsh and wrong in my mouth. They made the back of my throat ache and left my tongue numb. My head swam. My ears rang. And then, silence. Not around me, around words. I couldn't remember the word for lamp. I stared at the object on my desk, the thing that gave off light, and the name wouldn't come. That was only the beginning. The next morning, more words were gone. Notebook, teabag, shoelace. Entire concepts began slipping through the cracks. I'd speak and trail off, forgetting mid-sentence what I was trying to say. My notes became riddled with holes where words used to be. I thought I was losing my mind. Until I opened the Codex again. The symbols had changed. Where once they were still and senseless, now they shimmered with recognition. As though reading that one line had given them permission. And I swear, on that second night, I saw a symbol twitch. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I wasn't tired, I was exhausted. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard whispering. Not outside my window or behind my walls, but inside my head. In that same warped cadence I'd uttered from the Codex. I didn't recognize the words, if they were words, but the tone was unmistakable. Urgent. Hungry. By morning, I was missing entire sentences from my thoughts. I'd try to write a note to myself, call the university or check library archives, only to stop midway, unable to remember the word for university, or even what I was supposed to check. My memory hadn't been wiped. I still knew what things were. But their labels, their linguistic handles, were hollowed out. I tried telling a colleague. Mark, from Historical Semantics. I cornered him in the corridor, tried to explain. There's this book. It's, not translating. I read a bit and now I can't find labels. 4 things. Common things. He laughed. Sounds like sleep deprivation. Maybe take a day off. But when I said, Codex, his smile vanished. What did you say? Codex. The Codex Tenebris. His skin went pale. Who told you that name? No one. It's on the last page. Faintly etched. I didn't tell him it was now pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. He didn't respond. Just turned and walked away. Didn't even look back. That night, I stayed in my office. I barricaded the door and laid the Codex on my desk under a harsh lamp. I wasn't going to read it. I swore I wouldn't. But something happened. The pages started to turn. On their own. They flipped silently, one after another, as if guided by an unseen hand. I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. My eyes locked on the curling symbols as they sped by. Then the book stopped. Landed on a single page. And without meaning to, I read it. The whole page. I don't remember speaking. But I remember hearing it. My voice, chanting something guttural and deep, layered with echoes. When it ended, the silence that followed wasn't natural. It was a void. A linguistic vacuum. And in the mirror on my wall, my reflection was, smiling. But I wasn't. The next day, my name was gone. Not from my ID or email signature, but from me. I sat down to write an apology to Mark, tried to sign the email, and couldn't remember the sequence of letters that made up who I was. I stared at my own name, written on my office door, and it might as well have been graffiti. Foreign. Stripped of meaning. That morning, a librarian I'd worked with for years walked past me in the hallway and didn't even acknowledge me. I said hello, tried to, anyway, but the word caught in my throat. Sounded more like a cough than a greeting. The Codex lay closed in my drawer. But I could feel it, like a toothache in my bones. Whispering through my skin. Inviting. By late afternoon, I began to notice something stranger. The world had gaps. In the campus garden, a bird sat motionless on a branch. Not resting, stuck, like a paused video. A student passed by and walked in a perfect loop, circling the same fountain 3 times without blinking. Back in my office, the notes on my desk rearranged themselves. Literally. I watched the ink shift, words collapsing into new, alien symbols. Not the ones from the Codex, these were jagged, sharp, like carvings in a cliff face. I recorded myself, hoping to capture the phenomena. But when I played the tape back, all I heard was the sound of wind. No voice. No background noise. Just a rising, rushing wind. And beneath it, breathing. My breathing. But it wasn't synced with mine. That night, I dreamed of a room without doors. A library without books. Shelves lined with mouths instead, each whispering a single word over and over, then falling silent as if the word had never existed. When I woke, I couldn't remember what dream meant. I had to look it up. And I wept. Because I knew then, the Codex wasn't just taking language. It was unmaking the idea of language. And I was next. I started labeling everything in my apartment. Frantically. Slips of sticky notes, chair, lamp, window, hand, plastered like charms against whatever unraveling force I'd awoken. I thought if I could just see the words, I'd remember them. Anchor them. Hold on to myself. But by morning, the notes were blank. No ink. No impressions in the paper. Like they'd never been written. And worse, the objects themselves felt off. The chair was heavier. Warmer. The window showed nothing but an unmoving gray fog, even though I lived 10 stories up in a city that never stopped. My hand looked unfamiliar. The lines on my palm didn't match. I counted 5 fingers but felt 6. At the university, my office was locked. My key didn't work. I knocked. Waited. No one came. A student passed by, and I called out, tried to, at least. The sound that left my mouth wasn't my voice. It wasn't anyone's voice. It scraped against the air, flat and insectal, like a phoneme that had never belonged in a human throat. The student glanced around, confused, then moved on. I turned and caught a glimpse of myself in the glass of a display case. My eyes were wrong. The color was draining from them, gray spidering outward from the pupils like frost patterns. Inside my skull, words were vanishing in real time. I could feel them slip, like sand through cracks in my teeth. Memory started to degrade not because I forgot what happened, but because I couldn't remember the words to frame them. Without language, memory unravels. That night, desperate, I opened the Codex one final time. I didn't read it. I swore I wouldn't. But the pages were blank. All but one. And that page bore a single line in English. You gave us your voice. Now we will take your name, your shape, yourself. Underneath, another line had appeared. Not in English. Not in any language I knew. But I understood it. Because it was written in me. I fled. Not metaphorically, I ran. Down the stairwell of my building, out into the street, breath ragged, heart a drumbeat in some language I still barely understood. I don't even know where I thought I was going. Somewhere with people. With noise. With words. But the city had gone silent. Not quiet. Silent. No car horns. No footsteps. No hum of electric life. Just a thick, nauseating stillness, like the moment before a scream. I passed shops with signs that no longer bore letters. Just blank wooden planks, or warped shapes that looked almost alphabetical, like letters drawn by someone who had heard of language but never quite grasped it. People were there. Walking. Standing at bus stops. Browsing through empty market stalls. But none of them spoke. Their mouths moved. They gestured. They laughed without sound, cried without sobs. And not one of them looked at me. They were performing normalcy, but they weren't really here. They were placeholders. Glitches. Masks. And I? I was the only one still aware that something had been lost. A kind of crackling noise began in my ears. At first, I thought it was static, but it was closer to paper tearing underwater. It grew louder with every step I took. Eventually, it led me to a narrow alley I swear had never existed before. It sloped downward, unnaturally, impossibly far for the city's terrain. At its end was a door. A tall, thin thing of dark, ancient wood. No handle. No hinges. Etched with symbols. My symbols. Ones I'd spoken that night I read from the Codex. Ones I no longer remembered, except somewhere, deep in my marrow, I did. As I approached, the symbols rearranged. Into something, almost human. A face. My face. It opened its eyes. And the door whispered my name, the name I had forgotten, in that stolen, clicking tongue. It beckoned me in. I stepped through. Or rather, I was stepped through. The sensation was like being swallowed whole by silence. Not darkness, there was light, but it wasn't coming from anywhere. It just was. Soft and cold, like moonlight on deep water. The door behind me vanished. Ahead, a hallway of impossible geometry. Too many corners. Too few walls. Shapes that shifted when I wasn't looking. The space smelled like mold, burnt dust, and something metallic, something like blood on old paper. Then I saw the shelves. Thousands of them. Lining the walls, stacking the air, hanging upside down like stalactites. Books, journals, scrolls. All unlabeled. All bound in covers that pulsed subtly, like something breathing. I moved forward, my feet making no sound. My body felt weightless, insubstantial, as though my outline was fraying. One of the books turned to face me. That's the only way I can describe it. It turned, adjusting its spine like a creature noticing movement. It opened, not like a hinge, but like a mouth. And inside were pages filled with text in that same non-language. Symbols I had once known, now shifting too quickly to grasp. But beneath them, scratched into the paper like desperate graffiti, was my handwriting. Pages and pages of it. Notes I had taken. sentences I'd forgotten I'd ever written. Until I saw the last page. It wasn't mine. It was me. A drawing of my face, scribbled in ink and something darker. Beneath it, the one who gave the word. The hollowed mouth. I reached out to close the book, but my fingers passed through it. Not in a ghostly way, in a way that made the book flinch. Like it didn't want to be touched by me anymore. And from behind the shelves, I heard shuffling. Not footsteps. More like paper dragging itself along the floor. A figure emerged. No face. No limbs. Just pages. Endless, rippling pages twisted into a man's shape. It moved toward me, slowly, folding with every step, whispering with no voice. But I understood it. "You are being written," it said. And when it touched me, I felt myself turning. Not around. Into something else. I woke up on the floor of my apartment. At least, I thought it was my apartment. Same furniture. Same faded rug. But the colors were wrong. Washed out, like an overexposed photograph. The air buzzed faintly, and every few seconds, the walls seemed to breathe. There were no clocks. No books. No screens. Anything that had once contained language was gone. Not removed. Erased. I tried to speak, just to hear myself again. Anything. A word, a grunt, even a scream. But nothing came. The concept of speech had left me. I touched my throat and felt movement. The shape of vocal cords, tongue, lips, they were there. But the bridge between thought and sound had crumbled. My mind still formed sentences. Or tried to. But they evaporated before they reached the surface. My phone sat on the table. Blank screen. I unlocked it anyway, no passcode anymore, the idea of passwords no longer made sense. Every app was gone except the Notes app. I opened it. And there, at the top, was a single file. Titled, Translation Incomplete. I tapped it. The screen flickered, then displayed a live feed. Of me. Not now. But earlier. In my office, reading the Codex. It wasn't a recording, it reacted to my touch, shifted angles. I could rewind. Zoom. It wasn't a feed from a camera. It was remembering me better than I could remember myself. Beneath the video was a line of text. Each time you forget a word, the Codex remembers. Another line appeared as I watched myself speak that first sentence from the book. Each memory lost becomes its ink. I dropped the phone. Or tried to. It didn't fall. It hung in the air, frozen, glitching slightly like a paused frame. The lights dimmed. The room pulsed once, twice. Then I saw the writing. On my skin. Not tattoos. Not wounds. Etched into the flesh of my arms, legs, across my ribs. Symbols. Sentences in the Codex's tongue. I was becoming a page. And somewhere, something was still writing. I couldn't scream. Couldn't curse. Couldn't even whisper. The silence had become invasive, like a fog that pressed inside me, colonizing the hollow spaces where language once lived. My thoughts had grown fragmented. I couldn't tell if I was thinking in words anymore or in shapes. Memories came as textures. Emotions arrived in flavors. That night, or maybe it was day, time had unraveled too. I left the apartment. I didn't plan to. My body just moved, as though following a sentence someone else had begun writing. The hall outside was longer than it should have been. The doors on either side were numbered with spiraling sigils that rearranged when I blinked. At the end stood a mirror. I didn't want to look. But I did. And there I was. Half me. Half, palimpsest. My left eye had become a static spiral of letters, layered over and over until the scara pulsed like a nested paragraph. My hands, no fingerprints anymore. Just endless lines of microscopic script, crawling over my palms like ants. Then, behind my reflection, movement. A flicker. I turned. Nothing. Turned back. The mirror was gone. In its place, a door, etched with a single glyph. Not a word. An idea. And I knew it. Somehow, I knew it meant, you may cross, but leave yourself. The handle was bone. Still warm. I opened it. On the other side, a library. But not like the last. No shelves. Just massive stone monoliths, each taller than a house, inscribed from top to bottom with glistening text that shifted as I read. Except I couldn't read anymore. Not truly. I felt the meanings instead, like songs hummed into my marrow. Each stone whispered what had been taken from me. My birth date. My mother's voice. The word for hope. I fell to my knees, shaking. And then I saw the final monolith. Blank. Waiting. My reflection shimmered on its surface, still changing, becoming more script than skin. There was no question what it was for. It was me. I was to be written. The monolith pulsed once, softly, like a breath. Then the glyphs began to etch themselves into its surface. Not carved by hand or tool, but unfurling like veins beneath translucent skin. I stepped closer, drawn forward not by curiosity, but by compulsion. The same kind of instinct that makes animals flee fire, or leap into it. As the symbols formed, I recognized none of them. But I knew what they said. I felt the truth of it crawl behind my eyes, nestling in the folds of my brain like eggs waiting to hatch. They were writing my story. But not the one I remembered. The words described events that hadn't happened, yet. Meetings I'd never had. Choices I hadn't made. A version of me who never opened the Codex, who left it untouched, mailed it to the university archives like a responsible academic. That man had lived. Grown old. Died quietly in a home filled with books and warmth. But it wasn't me. I reached out to touch the stone. The moment my fingers brushed the surface, my head snapped back. My vision dimmed. And I began to speak. My mouth moved without my will. The language wasn't human. It wasn't even phonetic. It came from deeper, older. As if something long buried in my blood had awoken and remembered its native tongue. The sounds hurt. Each syllable felt like swallowing splinters. My gums bled. My teeth loosened. And yet, I couldn't stop. My voice rose in pitch, carrying through the endless chamber like a signal flare. The other monoliths responded, vibrating, their glyphs glowing faintly, like ancient throats humming in unison. And then, silence. Not absence of sound. A rejection of sound. The air folded inward. From behind the monoliths, they emerged. Entities stitched from the tatters of lost languages. Creatures formed of mispronounced words and forgotten scripts, flickering like corrupted subtitles on a dying screen. Their limbs moved like syntax errors, wrong but still functional. They surrounded me. Watched me. Waited. And I understood. They were readers. And I had just invited them. They didn't walk. They hovered, limbs dangling, torsos twisted into looping punctuation marks, eyes shaped like question marks that blinked sideways. One of them exhaled, and the air tasted like old libraries and wet ash. They encircled me, tilting their heads in near unison, as if trying to decipher whether I was a manuscript or a mistake. One of them stepped, or rather, stuttered, forward. Its skin was made of flickering, scrawled ink that rearranged constantly. I tried to speak. Not to plead, but to clarify. to remind them I wasn't one of their pages. But the moment I opened my mouth, my voice, my language, bled out. Literally. The sound left in black trails from my lips, dripping onto the stone floor like spilled ink. The lead entity raised a limb. A tendril of ribbon-like text slithered toward me and pressed gently against my chest. Then it wrote. Not with a pen or carving tool, but into me. I felt the glyphs form beneath my skin, curling along ribs and nerves. They didn't hurt. Not at first. It was colder than pain. The kind of cold that makes you forget warmth ever existed. As it wrote, images flooded my vision. A field of mouths, whispering definitions to each other. A city where buildings spoke in haiku and collapsed if grammar was broken. A mirror that showed you only what others misunderstood about you. A woman, alone in a dark room, with no voice and too many ears. And then, me. Standing at a podium. Speaking to an audience of shadows. Except I wasn't speaking. I was unspooling. My words turned to worms. They crawled from my mouth and burrowed into the listening crowd. The vision ended. The glyph pulled away. And I saw what the creature had written into my chest. Glossophore. The one who carries the word. A vessel. Not a man anymore. A medium. And just like that, I understood. This had never been about translation. It had always been about transmission. The Codex wasn't asking to be read. It was asking to be spoken through. And now, I was its mouth. I don't remember walking. One moment, the creatures surrounded me, whispering in looping dialects that bruised the air. The next, I stood atop a stone platform in the center of what looked like an ancient amphitheater, though it pulsed, alive, with veins of moving ink beneath its cracked marble skin. The readers were gone. Replaced by listeners. Dozens. Hundreds. Maybe more. They wore no faces. Their heads were featureless ellipses, but they tilted them as if hanging on every fragment of me. Their bodies were skeletal outlines of languages I couldn't name. Some had extra limbs that turned pages that didn't exist. Others floated midair, tethered only by sentence fragments that spiraled endlessly around them. At my feet, the Codex. Open. Not bound anymore, its pages rippled freely across the floor like parchment tendrils, snaking toward me, curling around my ankles, my calves, higher. I didn't fight it. What was there left to fight? The glyph on my chest, the mark of the glossophore, burned like a brand. I opened my mouth, and the words came. I didn't choose them. Didn't even know them. They used me. Each syllable twisted my bones. Each phrase reconfigured my thoughts. Each passage spoken stripped something from my memory, a birthday, a lullaby, the shape of my father's hands. The crowd swayed in ecstasy, absorbing the word. And then it happened. A rupture. Reality hiccuped. The amphitheater glitched, folding into itself like a crumpled page. For a breathless second, I saw the world as it was, letters collapsing into static, buildings made of nouns dissolving into verbs, people unraveling into punctuation. I saw myself from above. A hollow man, stitched together by syntax. And in that glimpse, I understood. I was not reading the Codex. The Codex was rewriting me. Each line was a deletion. Each verse, a replacement. I wasn't translating language anymore. I was being translated, into something else entirely. When the rupture passed, I found myself kneeling. The Codex, no longer book, no longer object, clung to me like a second skin. Thin tendrils of script coiled around my arms, my spine, the corners of my mind. Every breath felt like it came with a footnote. Every thought was cross-referenced to a source I couldn't access. I reached up to touch my face. There was no face. My hand moved through where it should have been, met no resistance. Just cold air and static. I staggered to a reflective surface, a wall of onyx polished to a mirror's clarity, and confirmed what I feared. My features were gone. Not mutilated. Not erased. Redacted. Thick black bars hovered where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Like government censorship had reached into my biology and edited the parts that meant something. Even my voice was blurred, distant, as if dubbed in post with mismatched lips. And then, from behind me, I heard the whisper again. The first line I ever read aloud from the Codex. The one that started all of this. Only now, it came from someone else. I turned, slowly. Terrified. And saw a version of myself standing there. Unchanged. Whole. Unwritten. He looked at me with horror. I reached toward him, tried to warn him, but he stepped back. Then I saw what he held. The Codex. Still bound. Still inert. Still unread. It hit me like a falling verdict. I was no longer the man who found the Codex. I was its consequence. A recursive curse, playing out again. And again. And again. The Codex doesn't need to be sought. It needs to be spoken. And I had become its voice print. The redacted version of a man who once believed every language could be learned. But some aren't meant to be understood. Some are meant to overwrite. The copy of me, the version who hadn't yet spoken the Codex, vanished as quickly as he appeared, like a scene skipped forward in a broken film reel. The amphitheater collapsed in on itself, folding down into a single point of light, then bloomed outward again. But now it was a different place. A library. A true one this time. Endless shelves. Towering volumes. The air heavy with dust and time. But there was no color, everything in shades of bone white and ash. The silence was complete, but not restful. It pressed in like a migraine made of stillness. At the center stood a pedestal. On it, a single sheet of paper. Blank. Until I stepped closer. Then the ink bled upward from the fibers. One word at a time. Glossophore. Stage 5 initiated. Stage 5. I didn't know what the others were. I didn't remember going through them. But my bones did. My thoughts did. Some part of me had been tracking the transformation. Categorizing it. Like an academic. Like me. The paper continued writing itself. Autonomous language production increasing. Syntax stabilization required. Memory degradation, 89%. Identity anchors, insufficient. And then, a final note. Prepare for concordance null. I didn't know what it meant. But the moment I read it, the library erupted in a sound I hadn't heard in days. Laughter. It came from everywhere. Not mocking. Not joyful. Just, wrong. Pages tore themselves from the books around me, spinning into the air like ash in reverse. And I saw others. Other glossophores. Half men. Half languages. Some scribbled over completely. Others still mid-sentence. They gathered around me, speaking in overlapping dialects, each voice canceling the others out. A cacophony of meanings that meant nothing. And one of them reached forward, placed a hand, no, a symbol, on my chest. And said a phrase that shattered the last memory I'd clung to. You were never the first draft. The symbol on my chest flared white-hot, and for a moment, my vision fractured into glyphs. The world split into margins and footnotes. Every breath I took was annotated. Every movement referenced a rule I hadn't written but somehow now obeyed. And then, I collapsed. Not physically. Grammatically. My body deconstructed like a sentence diagram in reverse, subject dissolved, predicate frayed, modifiers flayed off and scattered into the void. I no longer was. I merely occurred. I floated, an idea. An implication. A concept adrift between tenses. Then came the voice. No language. Just intent. An emotion encoded in tone. And it translated itself into me, because I could no longer translate it myself. You are the afterword. I was deposited into a void shaped like a cathedral. The walls were pages, turned slowly by unseen hands. Each step I took left no imprint on the floor, but instead rewrote a piece of me. My mother's voice? Gone. Replaced with the memory of a sentence I never heard. My childhood bedroom? Now a footnote in someone else's biography. I was becoming a linguistic artifact, something unearthed rather than born. And then I saw it. The original Codex. Not a book. A being. Vast, spinal, endless, sprawled across dimensions like a cosmic scroll. Its eyes were quotation marks. Its teeth, ellipses. Its body covered in words too old to rot, too new to understand. It turned toward me. And read me aloud. I felt every syllable of my existence echo into being, then collapse. Definitions crumbled. Meanings bled. I was a rough draft again. No punctuation. No protection. Just raw language waiting to be absorbed. There was no light. Not anymore. Only glyphs. Endless, floating glyphs hanging in a sea of black ink that moved like breath. I hovered there, no longer with a body, no longer needing one. I had become a sentence fragment in a forgotten tongue, dangling between clauses of reality. The Codex loomed overhead, not watching, but reading. Its gaze sifted through me, rewriting what little remained. Not cruelly. Not maliciously. Just, methodically. The way an editor cuts a word that no longer serves the story. I felt the last pieces of me, my name, my loves, my regrets, pulled out one by one like bent staples. And in their place, new characters. New syntax. A language not meant for speaking, only for being spoken through. Then came the final mark. A symbol I cannot describe, not because it was too complex, but because it replaced every word I had left. It wasn't a period. It wasn't an end. It was an erasure. And the moment it touched me, I ceased to be reader, scholar, voice. I became text. They found the Codex days later, left on the desk of a young linguistic intern who didn't remember applying for the job. The cover was cracked, the pages brittle. No known language matched the script inside. Still, one passage caught her attention. Something in the arrangement of characters felt oddly familiar. She read it out loud. Just a line. And far, far away, beneath layers of thought and silence, a voice like mine stirred. Smiling. Waiting. The end.